Hi, this is Brian Pash, and welcome to another exciting podcast interview with automotive leaders. Today, for the first time, I'm having Satyan Merchant. He's the Senior Vice President leading up the automotive business at TransUnion. Satyan, welcome to the show.
Brian, thank you so much for having me on. I've been listening to all of the podcasts. They're really great. And I'm looking forward to this conversation and many more in the future.
Well, it is the perfect storm for TransUnion. Let me set the stage. Since I published my research report on the rise of CDPs in automotive retail, more and more dealer groups are reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, yeah, Brian, we're thinking of these things. We want to take care of our first party data. We're looking to increase retention, but the truth is well, most dealers have not taken their first party data seriously. Yeah, they've appended data, they've changed addresses on NCOA for mailers, but they don't save this data anywhere. So for the first time, with the potential of a central repository, that golden customer record, TransUnion steps up and says, man, we are a unique provider of identity, enrichment services, all to power a better retail experience. So, Satyan, when you talk with dealer groups, there's many choices for data pending, data enhancement. What's one thing that you say to dealers of the value proposition that TransUnion brings to the table?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, you referenced the report and you're having some conversations. I thought there were a couple of things in here which kind of starts this conversation. And when you got into the ID resolution side of it, there was something here where you said ID resolution, identity resolution is the foundation of a CDP. So I think when speaking with customers, that's where I try to get the conversation going. And I'm glad that you confirmed it, because that's my belief, right? It's great to pull all this data together and then activate off of it and improve customer experiences and improve bottom line at the end of the day. But it starts with identity resolution. So you asked me kind of what's the one thing that I like to have the folks that I speak with take away when it comes to TransUnion. It's around the persistency. What I'd say 99.5% persistency of data. It's something that is really rooted in our DNA of who we are at TransUnion. I can talk about that a little bit later. But the idea that not only unifying and getting to that golden record of a consumer, just the challenges of doing that and being able to stitch that together, but to keep that identity persistent over time in the longitudinal view is something that it's critically important for anyone that is implementing a CDP project and activating off of it and monetizing off of that. To make sure that it's not just one time I have the identities right, and then it falls apart. So for us, it's about that ongoing enrichment, matching, and creating the persistency on that identity that really kind of keeps the value of the CDP going in perpetuity.
And I'm not sure if dealers understand the importance of that, because I don't think they really understand how an identity graph is created and how important is consistency of that key that matches to that unique customer. And let me try to give a practical example for the dealers who are listening. Dealers, you have certain piece of information, let's just say transactional information from the DMS that could be 1 year old or could be 10 years old. During any life cycle of ownership, there's a lot of things that are changing with a customer. Could be additional email addresses, could be a different mailing address, could be a different phone number. All of these data points have to be updated into this digital ID, and maintaining that consistency or persistence of that ID, meaning that as Brian goes through his life cycle, that ID that TransUnion has for me is persistent, meaning it's active, it's alive until a time comes when I'm no longer living. And so, Satyan, when I think of dealers in the past, they may have used TransUnion to enrich data, to to increase match rates on Google and Facebook, but they never updated their DMS with that data. And then next quarter, they do it again, enrich and activate. The real benefit of the CDPs is, for the first time, these enrichments can be stored and then leveraged to create even richer, deeper profiles of consumers for activation. It seems like this is the perfect time for your company as you bring your data hygiene and data enhancement services almost in a consulting role for dealers who are trying to do more with their first-party transactional data.
That's right, Brian. And I think you said it before, and you just said it again. It's the perfect storm. And I think it's the perfect storm for a few reasons. One, it's driven by the end customer and the use cases, which is, again, as you mentioned in your Rise of CDPs report, this move towards customer experience, right? And like what many call the Amazon effect or the Netflix effect. So first of all, starting with the consumer, they're demanding the best and the greatest customer experiences and make decisions off of. They spend their dollars based off of those experiences. Number two, I think the dealer groups are kind of getting hip to it as well. And the fact that these CDPs are now in existence today, and they're relatively new, and they're creating great offerings that are out there to solve a problem that has been there forever in terms of the fragmentation of data and identity resolution. And then the third piece I'll take just a minute to mention is, again, the DNA of TransUnion in our company. We weren't positioned to necessarily work across this landscape even a few years ago, but our acquisition of Neustar in the last year or so has really kind of brought us to the forefront, because it brings together two or three very critical aspects that I think position us very well. Number one, Neustar, a marketing company, a marketing data company, that's kind of one of their primary areas, and the other one, their second primary area is their secondary area is around fraud, identity, and risk. Those together are, and especially that word identity again, are critical to really enriching and filling out a CDP. And so that part of TransUnion is really the wheelhouse and where we're playing a lot with this identity resolution. But the core, the historic side of TransUnion being credit bureau, is that we have privileged data access as well, in terms of, for us to really, at the end of the day, do what we've always done, but now in the use cases of CDPs, of automotive retailing, of dealerships, of marketing, which is resolve a consumer identity. And so, I'll just mention this because it often gets lost that at the end of the day, a credit bureau with the traditional credit file, what we do is we have to be perfect when it comes to identity resolution, because we're dealing with regulated credit data. We have to be as accurate as anyone out there when it comes to delivering a credit file that's used for a score on a loan application, right? So it's actually been something that TransUnion's been doing since day one. It's just been in the regulated credit space. Now we're really, with these data assets and these capabilities we have with Neustar, we're putting it all together, and we're able to do something that's really important, which is identify the positives or the yes on confirming an identity, but also identify the no's or throwing out the bads, right? So it's just as important to say, this isn't Brian Pash. And so we're not going to add this record to Brian Pash's golden record. It's actually incomplete or a typo, or maybe it's Brian Lash, but it was a typo, and we have to make sure we get that part right as well, right? So I think, again, that's what I mean by the DNA of a company, and the timing is perfect, I think, for TransUnion to really be one of the contributors in this space and help dealerships and automotive retailers move along on their CDP projects and really get the identity of their customers as accurate as possible.
When we talk about data enrichment, there are many companies that are selling dealers, hey, we have registration data, we have collision data, we have service data, and the list goes on.
Yep.
But one of the things that I wanted to highlight for our listeners is that one of the strongest areas of TransUnion with the Neustar acquisition is the highest quality of phone related identity resolution. And this is because of you're powering a lot of the caller ID and 911 services. Can we talk about dealers who should know that the phone is the #1 channel that their customers contact them with? And you have in the CRM and DMS lots of phone data, name, and but you may not have all the other data, dealers who are listening, but my cell phone, that's me. So let's talk about that, Satyan, about this. I'm making the pitch that the phone logs have to be in the CDP to show activity and customer profiles. How can you help dealers with this super strong, rich phone data?
Yeah, that's that is something that I would say is a differentiator for us. And again, similar to my previous response, goes back to the DNA of our company. And as you alluded to, Brian, actually the history of Neustar, the company, originates with the National Caller ID Exchange or database, which no longer exists. It's now managed through multiple entities. But when caller ID came about many years ago, Neustar, which wasn't even Neustar at the time, it was a different company, but the roots were still there, was the one that managed that database, right? And so that's the history of the company, and it's carried through, and it's been now that's been leveraged in many use cases, including this identity resolution. And so, to your point, phone surprisingly still continues to be one of the most important channels. And when it comes to identity resolution, one of the key points, again, I think you referenced this in the report, is not only the digital and online experience, which is where many consumers in the consumer journey, in the car shopping journey begin, and more are doing things online, but it's the online to offline and even back online is really the journey that using a CDP and getting identity and entity resolution correct, it's really where it shines. And so what's often that bridge to online and offline is the phone, right? It's either texting or phone calls or other ways to communicate with a consumer on their device, but it's not necessarily online. So our history in having to, because we were the custodian and really trusted to have caller IDs correct and continue to do, by the way, that's a separate service Neustar still continues to run. Because we were empowered with that and trusted with that, our phone number resolution is really a key that helps us do another important thing when it comes to entity resolution, which is really creating high fidelity output from low quality input or fragmented input. So when it comes to old data, right? So maybe an old phone number that's associated with Brian Pash, we might know his new phone number, right? Because we have that caller ID database or other data sets within TransUnion and Neustar, and we can actually update that. Or a fragmented record where all I've got is your phone number, Brian, because you supplied it for a service appointment, 120 days ago, but we don't have you never gave us your email address. You never gave us any sort of other indication of your online identity, right? Well, we can create that persistent identity for future contact or even instant contact. And I do want to share, this is not made up, I promise. Over the weekend, I actually went in I'm not going to name any names, but went in for a service appointment. Now I live in Chicago. I don't drive very much, and so my service appointments are pretty infrequent. And we had a great user experience with the dealership, but one thing that they didn't get quite right was the phone number piece. And again, I'm not kidding. This just happened 2 days ago, in that it was me that took in the vehicle and was there waiting for the service to be completed. But the vehicle is my wife's vehicle, and she was kind of the originating person on the purchase. So she kept getting the text messages about when the service was ready and when the car is ready to get picked up, while I was across the street at a coffee shop, right, waiting for it. And so there's still a lot of work to be done. And I would say this was a pretty technology for a dealership, but phone numbers are hard, like you said, Brian. Like, my number is mine, hers is hers. We're the same household. In a way, we're the same entity, but we're two different people with two different phone numbers. And again, as much of a positive experience in total it was with some of, in fact, again, I'm not going to name any names, but they've implemented some great technology that you've referenced in your report. It was overall a good experience, but they didn't quite get the phone number piece right. And I think that's where entity resolution, identity resolution that TransUnion provides would really help solve that kind of problem.
Let's talk about a topic that dealers are going to start to realize is important. I have not asked this question to you, so let's just hit it on the fly. We have identity resolution to resolve to an entity, Brian Pash. This is me. All these different identity pieces, and I'm Brian Pash. But in my house is Carrie Pash. The dog does not count. So there are some CDPs that don't do household mapping. They're just really good at resolving identity to an entity. How can TransUnion help a dealer group take their clean, golden records of data and help them map the individuals resolved in the CDP into households?
Sure. So part of the persistent keys that we build, and this is going to be like slightly technical, so I won't go too into detail, but part of our identity resolution is based on building persistent keys. And so that's kind of, I referenced earlier, the persistency. And those are meant and designed to be durable over time, month after month, year after year. Although obviously the data within that persistent key of a consumer will change. It's not that it can change. I am committed, and I think we all are understanding stuff will change, information will change. And so part of the keys that we build are not only the entity or the individual consumer key, but a household key. So, it would be like Brian has his individual key of 1, 2, 3, but his household is 4, 5, 6. Carrie, her individual key may be, 1, 1, 1, but her household key is also 4, 5, 6, right? And so it's lots of that privileged access of data that we have where we can really test and strengthen and embolden our household keys and our persistent and our individual keys for that matter, and to ensure that those continue to be durable. And so we have signals that come through many different channels of our data sets. Again, some of it is through maybe our more core and traditional business. Some of it is through what was acquired with Neustar. But for instance, if we get signal that a consumer, has a new mortgage, moves into a new home, maybe some attributes of that household might be different, but in the household, it's the same people. And then all of a sudden, if there's a new member of the household, right, that person would get added to the household key.
So important.
Right. And so, but again, a lot of it has to do with throwing out the bad and only taking the good. So, I would advise anyone thinking through all this data, because it can be messy. And I think there's no doubt that there's billions upon billions of bits and bytes and records of data, that more isn't better necessarily, right? So it's not just a matter of we have all the data. We have the data and we know what's of value, what remains persistent, what is durable, and we know what isn't. We know what we should be throwing out. And I think, again, that householding is key, because the other part I want to add, and you kind of mentioned this too, is because it's the foundation, again, is the identity. And that was established in your report, and I fully believe that. But then there's a matter of like, okay, well, once you have the foundation, what do you do with that next? And how do you activate and really drive the bottom line off of that? And so if you've got strong householding, you can then start to use some of the other partners in this ecosystem, some of our strongest partners like S&P Global Mobility, for things like loyalty, which is done at that garage level or the household level, right?
Right.
So they have garage predictor models that we work with them, right? And so now all of a sudden, if you know that me, Satyan, and my wife, Nima, are in the same household, then a predictor model can be activated off of both of us or either of us, right? It doesn't really matter which vehicle is registered in whose name. If we can identify that both me and my wife are in the same household, and S&P Global Mobility can have a really strong model to predict what's in the garage today and what might be something we're looking at tomorrow with some of the third-party data or first-party data that they can bring to the table as well.
And one thing in my conversations today with companies as I'm working on CDP consulting projects for dealer groups, you can't just use the address for householding. And that's super important. And the example that I thought of is that, hey, if I have a company and I'm buying a truck for my company, but I drive the truck. But my, office is down the street and it's registered with the company, yet it's my vehicle that I drive, and effectively it's in my garage, right? I should know about that, right? Like, hey, which cars did you buy personally? Which ones did you buy through the business? But where are they sitting every day? What are the people who are controlling those decisions? And that's why it's just not simple matching sometimes with a phone number or an address. It takes really expertise in identity resolution, which we've talked about a few times. One of the things you mentioned, and of course I think it's a theme for this year, is more and more dealer groups and OEMs are talking about improving the customer experience, but you can't improve the customer experience if you don't have the right data of each customer available for all touch points of the consumer experience. And one of the biggest complaints of dealers in the franchise model is that they have no clue when the OEM is sending a direct mail piece or an email piece or targeting their own customers. It could be through recalls, it could be for trade-in offers or a lease pull ahead. We know this all the time. And as dealer groups start to build a CDP, there's a new opportunity. Many of the OEMs already have CDPs, whether dealers know this or not. But there is a way for OEMs and dealer groups to share data without sharing the physical data, meaning, or influencing data without sharing the individual data, which could be something called the clean room. So we have clean rooms and safe rooms. Clean rooms do overlaps and help determine, maybe a marketing overlap or what's happening with one company's business versus the dealer's business, or a safe room where specific records are just updated without disclosing the other person's PII. It's just like, hey, these customers received a direct mail piece, activate appropriately, or these people are also got a recall notification. This is an area where TransUnion, as a trusted source for data, could be helping bridge the gap between OEMs and dealer groups. How do you see clean rooms, the ability for people to help each other without giving away their data, could transform automotive retail?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm very excited about this. I would say, again, early innings development, but something that in automotive retail, I see a lot of opportunity in the future. So as you described, I think clean rooms are exciting because it is that area that allow companies, right? And in your example, I think this is a great example, right? The tier one or the OEM and the tier three or the franchise dealer, to allow them to leverage sensitive data for analytics while preserving the privacy of the consumer. And I think that's key, right? The privacy, the data governance. It's actually a very elegant and unique and interesting way that it's a matter of leveraging that sensitive data without really necessarily having to share it in the traditional sense, right? So I'm not handing data over to you. You're not handing data over to me and taking possession. It's a unique and, again, elegant way to leverage each other's data. But again, a lot of it comes down to the identity side of it, right? So it's like creating that bridge, as you said, for the use case to put that data together so it can be leveraged together. To build out a little bit more, as you started with the OEM and the dealer use case, it's really valuable in a scenario where a dealer wants to find more in-market consumers and shoppers. So in a way, it's a lead, but it's also just as important. And again, you stress this in a lot of your conversations and your reports, and I think it's the right thing to stress. As much as the dealer wants to find more in-market shoppers and get those leads, the consumer wants to be known and wants to be treated as if the dealer of name your brand or OEM is the same entity as the OEM itself. So the consumer just as much wants to know that, hey, I was on the OEM website building out a vehicle, messing around, looking at the different colors, poking around the website. And I want the dealer to know that was an experience that I had, and okay if the dealer picks up off of that. What I don't want is a dealer to pretend that I don't know anything about the vehicle I'm shopping on, right? But really a clean room is a way for a dealer to capture that information from an OEM, and for an OEM to share that or make their data leverageable by the dealer for that in-market shopper. How far along on that website did they get? I mean, there's a difference between me going to GM's website and going to Corvette and just browsing the photos versus me going to, again, GM's website, but in this case, Chevy Equinox, and going all the way down to pre-qualifying for the exact trim that I'm looking for and looking at local dealership inventory. And that's data that the OEM has that in a clean room, again, powered by someone like TransUnion to stitch the data sets together, to share with the local Chicago area dealerships to say, well, guess what? This consumer who we know quite a bit about, because guess what? He's loyal to this brand. We know exactly where along the shopping process they are. But again, dealers and OEMs may not be able to, from a privacy point of view, from a consent point, they may not be able to transfer and ship the data and allow each other to own it. So they must use a clean room as a version of a solution to leverage that data and complete the experience for the consumer, and hopefully complete the sale for the sake of both the dealer and the OEM.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited that we're bringing this topic to DMSC, because this is just one example of the advanced conversations we're having that are happening at DMSC to really help the industry move forward. We're not talking about, hey, respond to leads within 1 or 2 minutes. That's been killed to death. We're really talking about transformational technologies and thought processes to improve the customer experience, to improve our marketing campaigns, to improve the coordination between tier 1, tier 2, and 3. These are all really important topics. Satyen, you work in many ways through partners in the automotive ecosystem. So you're working with CDP platforms, you're working with marketing agencies. What about large dealer groups who are working on a CDP project? Are they allowed to go direct to you, or would they need to go through like their CDP partner to, talk about the data enrichment strategy that would be best to support their business use cases? What's the current support structure? Because only the larger dealer groups are swinging the bat at this right now.
Yeah, no, great question, Brian. We are available and through all channels. I would say that makes sense in this ecosystem. And so through the partner side, I was really encouraged when reading your recently released CDP report. Many of my friends and our partners were cited. You spoke with many of them. You spoke with some of them recently on your podcasts at Orbi and Telium and many of the other ones out there. So for sure, that's one route. But also, part of what me and my team are building, and we got a huge injection when here at TransUnion we acquired Newstars, is working and leading in this automotive retail space. People think about TransUnion maybe historically in just the credit bureau space, but we have an auto vertical. We've been in the auto vertical for a long time. And so I've got folks on my team. We were at CXO, great event that you sponsored a little while ago in March. I'll be leading that panel that you mentioned at DMSC in Austin next month. And so please, any large dealer groups or anyone interested in learning more, please come to speak with me, or you can reach out to my team. Really, I think you touched on this again in your report. I think it's about the use cases. I think it's really, thinking in that consultative approach. That's the background me and pretty much everyone on my team. My team is either people who have thought through this from a data and an integration point of view in many different verticals, including auto, or on the other end, I've got folks on my team who have only lived and breathed in auto, started dealerships themselves, been at dealers. Literally, one of my folks, Josh, on my team the only industry he's ever worked in is automotive, starting washing cars at a car wash when he was in high school. And so we really try to address the use cases and the needs of our customers, like dealerships and large dealer groups. So, again, feel free to reach out to me, as well as our partners, because I think strong partnership is the way that this industry moves the ball forward. I don't think there's anyone who has, the silver bullet or the answers to all and can do everything for everyone. I don't know if that unicorn exists. I think instead through partnerships, through folks like Automotive Mastermind or Treasure Data, and then Orbi and the other ones that I mentioned, is the way that we drive value in the industry.
Well, we are excited about DMSC this year in Austin. After 10 plus years in the Napa Valley, we're moving our conference to the beautiful city of Austin. Easier airfare routes, cheaper hotels. Everything about the event is designed to give greater access to the people who are responsible for leading the next generation of sales ideas and revenue strategies for the dealers. So I want to encourage everyone to go to digitalmarketingstrategies.org, get registered, and here's a little treat. Write down this code, FOMO200, FOMO 200, save $200 on your DMSC tickets. And also, you should know that we added an extra day to the conference dedicated to GA4 hands-on training. Everyone should know that July 1st, your existing Google Analytics data feed stops, and most dealers I've inspected do not have access either to the proper GA4 account, or they have not configured their GA4 account properly, and we're running out of time. So it's an extra reason to come out to DMSC. What are the main topics we're going to be discussing this year? First-party data management, data privacy, customer data platforms, just like we're talking about today. GA4, modern sales process, and how to use AI in your sales and service workflows to fill gaps in your staffing capabilities and to improve the customer experience. At a very high level, we're going to talk about strategies that really create the customer experience that every dealer group wants to have. And if this is the first time you're listening to one of our podcasts, you should know that there are dozens of interviews with industry leaders like Satyen and his team at TransUnion. So you can go to brianpash.libsyn.com, that's Libsyn, or just search for the Brian Pash Podcast on Apple or the Google Play Store and listen to all of these interviews in the series leading up to DMSC in May. Those dates are May 21, 22, 23, and the bonus day, if you want to stay, for GA4. Satyen, if there was one thing you wanted to leave dealers today before we sign off, what's that one message as you look out to the automotive retail dealership of the future?
I would say that the one thing for dealerships to keep in mind is that as we know in this industry, it all comes back to the consumer. And the consumer may evolve over time, does evolve over time, but really understanding who that person is, it starts with the identity of that consumer. And I think the highest fidelity identity you can get really helps unlock the power of your CDP, your marketing activation platform, and your auto retailing. And so making that foundational investment, right? As you said in the Rise of the CDP report, that the foundation is the identity. Making that foundational investment is really sort of the I will say maybe the motor oil, right? Or really like kind of the lifeblood of all things that you can then unlock afterwards when it comes to that consumer experience, and ultimately really driving the bottom line of your dealership.
Well, those are good words to challenge all the dealership executives here. Are you using data to create the experience that customers want? The potential's here to stop complaining about the 12 plus sources that all share pieces of the customer journey, the ability to bring them all together to communicate precisely and personally, to create new experiences online, to increase loyalty and lifetime value of each customer. Well, those are things that every retailer needs to be thinking about. So, Satyan, thanks for your time today. And for everyone who's listening, I hope to see you in Austin, Texas in just a few weeks as we tackle the most important problems and opportunities facing auto dealers today. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time on another podcast interview.